Hi, I'm Russell Axford. I'm the head of executive search at Clarity Recruitment. Today on Behind the Numbers, we have a dear friend, Bryn Knox, head of finance at BenchSci. Bryn, thanks very much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Russ.
Yeah, no worries. So, Bryn, I've worked with several different finance professionals throughout my career, and your story is one that's always resonated with me. It's a very interesting journey. How you started off in marketing at Walt Disney, and then made a pivot to jump into finance. So, I'd love just to talk to you a little bit about your journey and kind of what you're up to now as head of finance at BenchSci. Again, looking at your background, you have Walt Disney, you've moved over to, Olay, Media, Wave, now BenchSci. This is an example of a finance leader being able to move across several different industries. I'm curious, what challenges did you face as a leader in finance, moving across different industries?
As a person in finance, you always want to have your fundamentals. There's kind of that backbone of accounting and finance that you can rely on. And I always kind of say that's your foundation. And so, numbers are numbers. You always know who, your reporting requirements and everything you need to do. So you can kind of always fall back on those. And then the other part is making sure that you're super curious and that you're connecting with who are the key stakeholders, who matter, who are the decision makers in your company, and then also even getting a layer down from that and talking to other coworkers, just generally, just to kind of get that mood, like what are they thinking, what do they see, what matters to them. And so kind of for me, it's really been about how can I learn as much as I can from these people who've already done it. Personally, one of the things I've done when I joined, it's really about, in your first 90 days at any job, you're going to be a really set of fresh eyes. You're going to bring in this perspective. And it's really important to start kind of noting that and know those 90 days are really, really important. You're probably going to work longer or be a lot more tired simply because you're just learning so much during that time. I also try to identify what I call like the low-hanging fruit. What are some like easy wins right off the bat? And that can be anything, is it finding, just some of the basic accounting processes, like how are we reporting? What are some things we could maybe just pick up there? Also remember, as a person in finance, one of your key customers is your fellow employees. So you're also supporting them through things like payroll and expense management. So sometimes, and a good example of that, when I joined BenchSci, that was one of the things I upgraded. I took us right to a, professional payroll software and expense management platform. So it was just like, how do I get this up and reduce any stress on my fellow coworkers?
Yeah.
And so that's just what I call it. It's like, it's that low hanging fruit. And you try to also, be adaptable, right? Like you really want to do that due diligence and just learn as much as you can, ask a bunch of questions. And through those questions, you're going to find, what are those pain points? What are pain points for customers? What are pain points for your coworkers? How can you help, guide anything in there? Like whether it's you not even doing it, maybe you're giving advice to them from what you've learned in the past, but also bringing that back to your team and like, what can you do within your team to better support the company?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I like that. So when you look, you said it earlier, it's you have the baseline of finance and accounting knowledge, but when you're stepping into these new environments and new industries, how do you personally learn the key drivers of the business so that you can start, setting up financial projections or forecasting, basically around financial management? When you haven't been in that industry before, how do you learn those key drivers to help you be better in your role?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most difficult aspects of joining something, a brand new product, brand new industry. And I definitely say you've got to really have you've got to be a zero. You can't have any ego. You can't think you know what you're doing. You got to go in curious, and make sure that you cut to those people who have been there and truly live and breathe the product. And so the example of BenchSci, that would be, our CEO, our sales team, and our marketing team, and product would be in there as well. And making sure, going to the key members of those teams and really understanding, why do our customers use our product? What problem are we solving? And how do we get them to come back, and how are we getting them to pay for our product, and like what does all of that look like? And as you kind of build that story by asking all of these different people these sets of questions, sometimes the same questions, and sometimes it leads into different questions with each of them. You kind of end up building it's a bit of a mental model around it. And as you kind of work through that, you can kind of throw that back at them and be like, hey, I'm thinking about, this is a key driver in how revenue works for this product. And then you can kind of get into that, bouncing ideas off each other. And maybe your brain and perspective that they hadn't noticed. And it's like, oh yeah, that's actually really smart. Or they can catch you where maybe you have a blind spot, you haven't thought about something. And so I would say that was probably, for me, the best way that I found to really get into, just getting your hands dirty, getting right in there and asking as many things as you can. And then figuring out a bit outside of just your product, right? It's like, what's going on in the market? Who are our competitors? Where is this industry going? Because this is what we're doing today, but what are we doing in 3 years, 5 years, and how can that grow into that area, and keep your mind kind of on that side as well.
What do you do in a situation where it's like an industry where you don't really have something to compare against? It's a relatively new market that BenchSci is going after.
When I started, we had a rough model. So there was already, we had some customers, we kind of knew where things were going. And so I kind of took it and revamped it, again, rely on the experience you have, really go back to, what are models you've built before? What do you think are some sensible sort of assumptions you can make? Do research. That I can't overstate enough. Like, make sure you're going out there and, again, just being as curious as you can and getting feedback from whether it's other finance leaders who are now maybe in, and since we're a subscription as a service company, that was kind of where I started. I was like, what's the fundamental way we're selling to customers? Well, we're selling subscriptions for our product to them. Okay, so you kind of start backing into that and finding models that work generally, and then you start turning it again back to your industry. And this is where you really, and I would say, building that relationship with your head sales, who's doing sales, what is their strategy, what do they think is going to happen, like, who are your key customers? And you start kind of plotting that out and saying, what's your pricing? And it's more about, what has your current pricing been and where do you think it's going to go? And then along the way, you kind of start managing, I guess I would say, as finance, you want to start building some scenarios, right? So if someone's telling you, oh, we're going to, pricing's going to grow 100x. Okay, build out where it's going 50x, 10x, what does all of that look like? And try to build in something that's, I say realistic. It's hard to be realistic because when you have a brand new product, you really don't know. Like, and I think that's the other thing. You have to really sit there and be comfortable. Because I think as finance people, we always want certainty. We, want to know, like, we're going to have X% of growth and this is exactly what's going to happen. And, we're going to close that deal exactly on that date. And just get comfortable with knowing that there's going to be risk and you're going to get it wrong. And it's all about learning and going, wow, I made wrong assumptions there. And I missed that we were going to close something bigger, or we got something smaller, but hey, we're going to go do this. And so you're just constantly revamping and keeping up, like, build that pipeline with sales and make sure that you're constantly getting feedback. I know a tool that we've used is Salesforce. And, our sales team has built out wonderful reporting where, based on their weekly meetings, they're constantly feeding that back. And it helps me just know, kind of take the temperature, what's happening. I can ask specific questions and know what's going on and therefore inform my model.
I look back, I had the pleasure of working with you when you were at Wave, when we placed you there. And I think Wave at that time was very different than what it is today. Arguably, I think it's, one of the biggest tech exits in Canada, which is awesome. So I'd love just to, shed some light on what it was like working there in that high growth and what you're able to accomplish as you're building out your finance team.
Yeah. You're very, very correct. So Wave had quite a large exit. So they were purchased last year by H&R Block for 400 million US. So it's got them in the top 10 tech exits in Canada in history. And so personally, for me, that was pretty amazing and incredibly satisfying to see Wave's exit. There are 3 people in the finance team. in total. And I think we had like mid 60 employees for the company. By the time I left 3 years later, we had 7 people in our finance team and over 180 employees in the company, and continuing to grow. So it was, just absolutely high growth in every team across. And so, that puts a lot of pressure on finance too, because you've got new products coming to market. So you're also trying to support those. You've also got a lot of people, new teams being formed. So you're trying to support and just make sure you're keeping that foundation strong to make sure to make sure that the company can keep doing and building on what it's doing.
Yeah.
And, we've got revenue doubling every year. And so, it's a great environment. It's very, there's a lot of energy. The culture at Wave was great. The people I worked with, I had an amazing boss who, pushed us to do things that, you didn't think you could do. So I think there was a lot of that growth culture mindset. And, you never really thought about what the status quo. It was always about what can we do? What are we going to do? And, really kind of setting up those goals to achieve that. And so for me, it was, growing out that team from 3 to 7. Obviously, kind of along the way, had a big hand in helping, who joined or what were we doing. And we brought in some amazing people, again, with lots of different skill sets and experiences, which was amazing to see how we all kind of blended together. And I think that's a great example where I said before, bring those people together can really make the sum greater than its parts. And it was, it was an amazing ride. I can't say enough about what Wave was doing and will continue to do, and a lot of the friendships that I've made there. It was an amazing, amazing time.
Bryn, thank you so much for sharing your journey and giving us insight into financial projections and working in growth companies. It's again, it's really amazing to see where you've taken your career, and I'm excited to see where it's going to continue to go.
Yeah, thanks for this. Really appreciate the time, Russ. It's always great working with you, and I'm happy to do this for Clarity.
Cool, man. Thank you.